If you are lying in bed tonight, shifting from side to side, trying to find a position where nothing hurts, tonight we sit with something the Buddha taught about the body. Not how to fix it, but how to finally stop fighting it. There is a woman somewhere tonight who looked down at her hands and saw her grandmother's hands looking back. The same age spots, the same raised veins. She did not know when this happened. One morning she was 30, and her hands were smooth and quick. And then somehow, without anyone telling her, they became the hands of someone older, someone who has kneaded bread and wiped tears and held other hands through long nights in hospital corridors. Tonight we are going to spend some time with those hands, with those knees, with that back, with the body that carried you here, to this bed, to this moment, without ever once being asked if it wanted to. What we will explore tonight comes from the Buddhist tradition, from teachings that are over 2,500 years old. We will hear stories of women whose bodies ached, of monks who learned to listen, of a young prince who saw old age for the very first time. We will follow the Buddha himself, from the moment he first saw an aging body outside the palace walls, through 6 years of punishing his own flesh, to the quiet night when he finally lay down and let go of it all. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you are listening from. You do not need to know anything about Buddhism. You do not need to do anything with your body tonight. If it aches, let it ache. If it is tired, let it be tired. We are not here to fix anything, just to listen. So, settle in wherever you are. Let your shoulders drop a little. Let the pillow take the weight of your head. Let the bed hold you. You have held enough today. Thank you for joining us here at Moonlit Dharma. Let us begin. There is a teaching in Buddhism called kāyagatāsati. The word is old. It comes from the Pali language, the language the Buddha spoke in, and it means something close to mindfulness, immersed in the body. Not mindfulness about the body, not mindfulness that watches the body from a distance, the way a doctor might examine a patient, but mindfulness that sits inside the body, that lives there, that feels what the body feels without rushing to fix it, or change it, or wish it were different. The Buddha gave this teaching to a gathering of monks more than 2,000 years ago. He told them to pay attention to the breath moving in and out, to notice the body sitting, standing, walking, lying down, to feel the weight of it, the temperature of it, the quiet rhythms it keeps going, even when the mind is elsewhere. He was not asking them to admire the body. He was not asking them to criticize it. He was asking them simply to notice it, to be present with it, the way you might sit beside an old friend who has come a long way to visit you. There is a verse in the Dhammapada, one of the oldest collections of the Buddha's words, that says this: "Fully worn out is this body, a nest of disease and fragile. This foul mass breaks up, for death is the end of life." Those words sound harsh when you first hear them. Worn out, a nest of disease, fragile. But listen again, the Buddha is not insulting the body. He is describing it honestly, the way a farmer might describe a field after 40 years of harvest. The soil is tired, the furrows are deep. But look at what it grew. Look at the wheat, the corn, the children it fed. The field is not a failure because it is worn out. It is worn out because it gave everything it had. Most of us were taught somewhere along the way that the body is a project, something to manage, to diet, to exercise into shape, to fight against when it slows down. We were taught to see every ache as a failure, every wrinkle as a loss, every morning, where the knees creak louder than the day before, as evidence that something has gone wrong. But what if nothing has gone wrong? What if a body that aches after 60 years of carrying you through the world is not a broken body? What if it is simply a body that has done its work? One woman wrote that her body, once renovated and buffed at the gym, had become what she called a fixer-upper. She spent years treating it like a house, with a leaking roof and peeling paint, always one repair away from being good enough. And then one night, lying in a bed not so different from yours, she said 2 words about it that changed everything. It is home, not a project, not a problem, home. Think about your own body for a moment. Not what it looks like, not what it can no longer do, but what it has done. Think about the hands that are resting right now, wherever you have placed them. How many doors have they opened? How many faces have they touched? How many letters have they written? Meals have they prepared? Children have they steadied when they were learning to walk? Think about the feet. How many floors have they crossed in the dark to check on someone sleeping? Think about the back. How many things has it carried that no one ever saw? Let us explore a story about this. In a small town along the coast, in a country that does not matter, because the story could happen anywhere, there lived an old woman who had been a seamstress for 40 years. Her shop was a narrow room with a single window facing the sea. The floorboards were scattered with pins and snippets of thread, and the air always carried the faint scent of cotton and iron from the pressing board. Everyone in that town had worn something she made: wedding dresses, school uniforms, Sunday shirts, curtains for the first apartment. A dark suit for a funeral nobody wanted to attend. For 40 years her hands moved quickly. The needle obeyed. The fabric fell the way she wanted it to. She could thread a needle without looking, the way some people can tie their shoes in the dark. It was not a talent she thought about. It was simply what her hands did. Then one autumn her fingers began to swell. The knuckles thickened. The joints grew stiff in the mornings and stayed stiff longer into the afternoon. She bought thicker needles, then padded grips, then magnifying glasses. She adjusted, she adapted. But one evening, sitting alone in the shop after everyone had gone, she tried to thread a needle and could not. She tried again and again. The thread would not go through. Her hand was shaking. She put the needle down on the table and cried. When her granddaughter came to visit that weekend, she found the shop closed and the old woman sitting at her kitchen table, staring at her hands. "What is wrong, grandmother?" "These hands," the old woman said quietly. "They are useless now." The granddaughter sat down across from her. She reached across the table and took her grandmother's hands in her own. She turned them over. She looked at the swollen knuckles, the thin skin, the small scars from decades of pinpricks and scissor slips. "Grandmother," she said, "do you know what these hands have done?" The old woman said nothing. "These hands made my mother's wedding dress. These hands hemmed my first school uniform, and I remember standing on that stool right there while you pinned it. These hands sewed the curtains in Aunt Maria's apartment. These hands made the suit my father wore to bury his own father in. These hands are not useless, grandmother. They are finished. There is a difference." The old woman looked at her granddaughter for a long time. She did not say anything, but she stopped crying, and she did not let go of her granddaughter's hands. The granddaughter gave her grandmother one of the simplest and deepest gifts anyone can receive. She gave her a different way to see her own body. For most of us, when we look at a part of ourselves that no longer works the way it once did, we see a malfunction, a breakdown, a loss. We measure the body against what it used to do and find it wanting. The hands that once threaded a needle without looking are now the hands that cannot. And so we call them useless. We skip over the 40 years in between as if they were nothing. But there is another way to look. The way a farmer looks at a field after the last harvest. The way a sailor looks at a boat pulled up onto the shore for the final time. Not with pity, with respect, because the work was done, and it was good work. In Buddhist understanding, this is one of the most overlooked teachings about the body. We are so accustomed to thinking of the body as a tool that we forget it is also a witness. It was there for everything. It stood at the altar. It paced the hallway when the baby was sick. It carried groceries up 3 flights of stairs for years without being thanked. It sat in hard chairs at parent-teacher conferences. It drove through fog to get somewhere on time. And now it sits here, tonight, aching, and we treat it like something that has failed us. But it has not failed. It has finished a portion of its work. That is not the same thing at all. There is a phrase that women sometimes use when they speak about their aging bodies. They say the body has become a fixer-upper, always one repair away from being right. But there is a moment, often late at night, when the repairs stop mattering, when the question shifts from what is wrong with this body to what has this body done. That shift is not small. In many ways, it is the beginning of what the Buddha was pointing toward all those centuries ago. In the Pali language, the word for body is kāya, but kāya does not simply mean a physical form the way we think of it in the West. It carries the sense of a collection, a gathering. A kāya is the gathering of everything that has passed through you. Every breath you have taken, every step you have walked, every hand you have held. The body is not just flesh and bone. It is a record, a living archive of everything you have given and everything you have survived. There is another verse in the Dhammapada that says this: even gorgeous royal chariots wear out, and indeed this body too wears out. But the Dhamma of the good does not age. The chariot that carried the king across the kingdom was not thrown away because it was ugly. It was retired because it had traveled far enough. Your body has traveled far enough too, and the goodness it carried does not age. Let us explore another story about this. This one goes back a very long way. More than 2,500 years ago, in what is now northern India, there lived a young prince named Siddhartha. He was 29 years old and he had never left the palace grounds. His father, the king, had made sure of that. The king had been told by wise men that if the prince ever saw suffering, he would leave the palace and become a wandering seeker. And so the king filled the palace with beauty. Young attendants, fresh flowers, no one old, no one sick, no one dying was allowed inside the walls. But one day the prince asked his chariot driver, a man called Channa, to take him outside. And for the first time in his life, Siddhartha saw an old man. The man's back was bent, his hands trembled. His skin hung loose from his arms the way cloth hangs from a line after the rain. He walked slowly, each step an effort, leaning on a stick that was itself worn smooth from years of use. The prince stared. "Channa," he said, "what has happened to that man?" "He is old," the driver said quietly. "His body has aged. Does this happen to everyone?" "It does." Siddhartha was quiet for a moment. He looked at his own hands. young, smooth, strong. Then he looked again at the old man disappearing down the road. "Will this happen to me?" "Yes, Prince. It will happen to you too." That moment changed everything. Not because the prince was afraid of aging, but because for the first time he saw the body clearly. He saw that it changes, that it wears, that it carries us for a while and then it slows, and that no amount of palace walls or fresh flowers can stop that from happening. What is easy to miss in this story is that Siddhartha did not turn away from the old man. He did not close the curtain. He looked. He stayed with what he saw. And in that staying, something opened in him. A question that would eventually lead him to leave the palace, to wander for years, to starve his own body nearly to death, and finally to sit beneath a tree and wake up. We will hear more of that story later tonight. The years of punishing the body and the bowl of rice milk that brought him back to it. But for now, what matters is this first moment. The prince looked at a body that had worn out, and instead of seeing failure, he saw truth. The body that ages, the body that aches, the body that slows, is not a problem to solve. It is the first honest teacher any of us ever meets. There is something in this that speaks directly to the way many of us relate to our own bodies tonight. We do what the king did. We try to build palace walls around the aging. We dye the hair. We replace the knee. We take the pills that make the mourning bearable. And none of these are wrong. But beneath all the fixing, there is a quieter question that most of us avoid. Can I sit with this body as it is, not as it was? Not as I wish it were, but as it is, right now in this bed, with whatever aches and whatever stiffness and whatever tiredness it carries tonight. Can I simply be here with it, the way the prince stood on that road and simply looked? In Buddhist practice, this is called being present with the body. It is not a technique. It is not a meditation you need to learn. It is simply the decision to stop turning away, to stop treating the body like a problem and instead to treat it like what it is. A companion that has walked every step of your life beside you, that has never once left. Many ancient cultures understood the body differently than we do today. There is a tradition among the Yoruba people of West Africa, passed down through centuries of storytelling, that says something remarkable about the body you are lying in tonight. The Yoruba believe that before you were born, your soul traveled to the realm of the divine. There, a potter named Ajala shapes heads from clay. Some are fired perfectly, some are cracked, some are still soft. And your soul, standing in that realm before birth, chose one. You chose your head. You chose, in a sense, the body that would carry you through this life. Not all the heads are perfect. Ajala, the stories say, is sometimes careless, sometimes distracted. Some of the heads he makes are underbaked, some are brittle. But here is what matters. Your soul still chose. It chose this head, this body, this collection of bones and blood and breath, before the tree of forgetfulness wiped the memory clean. The Yoruba say that before entering the world, every soul passes through this tree, and a blade cuts the path, and the sacred agreement you made in the other realm is forgotten. You arrive here not remembering that you chose, but the body remembers. It remembers the agreement even when the mind does not. It keeps breathing. It keeps healing small wounds while you sleep. It keeps sending blood to your fingers and warmth to your chest and air into your lungs without asking for a single word of gratitude in return. That, in Yoruba understanding, Is the body honoring the choice the soul has forgotten? The body holds the promise the mind cannot recall. And whether it arrived cracked or whole, it was yours. It has been yours all along. Most of us have never thought of our bodies this way. As something chosen. As something that came to us not as a burden but as a companion for the crossing. We have spent so many years wrestling with it, bargaining with it, ignoring it, punishing it for changing, that we have forgotten a simpler possibility, that the body is not the enemy, that it never was, that the war we have been fighting all these years has been a war against something that has only ever tried to carry us safely through. Consider what your body has survived. Not just the large things, the surgeries, the illnesses, the losses that pressed so hard against the chest you thought the ribs might crack, but the small survivals too. The thousands of cold mornings it got out of bed when the mind wanted to stay. The afternoons it walked to the mailbox, and back when the heart was so heavy, it felt like the feet were dragging stones. The nights like this one, when it lay down and kept breathing even though the mind was full of noise. Your body did not need a reason to keep going. It just kept going. That is not weakness. That is the quietest kind of devotion there is. Tonight, lying here, your body is still doing its quiet work. The heart is beating. The lungs are filling and emptying. The blood is moving through its old familiar channels. It does not need your permission for any of this. It does not need your approval. It has been doing this since the very first second of your life. And it has not stopped once. Not once. Not during the worst night you have ever lived through. Not during the saddest day. It kept going. For you. So here is something simple to carry with you tonight. Instead of asking your body why it hurts, try asking it what it remembers. You do not need to do this out loud. You do not even need to do it with words. Just place your attention on whatever part of you is tired or sore right now. Maybe it is the lower back, maybe the shoulders, maybe the knees that creak every morning before the coffee is ready. Whatever part of you is asking for attention tonight, instead of wishing it were different, simply say, quietly, on the inside, I know what you have done. You do not need to list everything. The body already knows. It knows the weight of the children it lifted. It knows the floors it scrubbed. It knows the long drives and the sleepless nights and the mornings it got up anyway. You do not need to remind it. You only need to acknowledge it. The way you might nod to someone who has been working beside you all day in silence. Not a speech, just a nod, just the quiet recognition that they were there. That is enough. Nothing needs to change tonight. Nothing needs to be fixed. Just that small knowing. Just that quiet nod between you and the body that has carried you this far. Let us pause here for a moment. Take a slow, deep breath. Let it go without hurrying it. Notice how you are feeling right now. Not how you think you should be feeling. Just how you are. When you are ready, we will continue together. In the next chapter, we will look into a mirror, and we will meet someone there we may not have expected to see. There is a teaching in the Dhammapada that begins with a strange instruction. Behold this body, it says. A painted image, a mass of heaped up sores, infirm, full of hankering, of which nothing is lasting or stable. The first time you hear those words, they sound like a rejection of the body. As if the Buddha is telling you to look at yourself and see something ugly. But that is not what he is doing. He is asking you to look honestly. The way a painter might step back from a canvas she has been working on for 60 years and see it fully for the first time. Not just the colors she applied this morning, but every layer beneath, every correction, every mistake painted over, every shade that faded in the sun. The painting is not ruined, it is complete. It contains everything. In Pali, the language of the Buddha, the word for form, for the physical shape of things, is rūpa, and rūpa does not mean what we might think it means. In English, form suggests something fixed, a shape, a structure, but rūpa comes closer to meaning that which is always changing. The form is not the thing that stays, it is the thing that moves. Like a river that looks the same from the bridge, but is never the same water twice, your body is rūpa. It has always been rūpa. It was rūpa when you were 7 years old and running across a field with grass stains on your knees. It was rūpa when you were 30 and carrying a child on your hip. It is rūpa now, tonight, lying here. The changes are not something that went wrong. They are the nature of the form itself. The Buddha was not warning us that the body changes. He was reminding us that change is what the body does. That is its work. That is what it has always done. Think of a candle. When you light it at 7 in the evening, the flame looks the same at 7:15, and at 8, and at 9. But the wax has changed. The wick has shortened. The shape of the candle is different every minute. Even though the flame looks steady, if you took a photograph of the candle every hour and laid them side by side, you would see that you were never looking at the same candle twice. You were looking at a process, a burning, a giving of light that required the wax to change its shape in order to keep going. That is rūpa. The body does not change despite its purpose. It changes because of its purpose. Every year it gave light, it gave something of its shape to do so. Most of us carry an older photograph of ourselves inside our heads. Not a real photograph, though sometimes those are painful enough. But a mental image, a version of ourselves from 20 or 30 years ago, that we still, quietly, believe is who we really are. The hair was different then. The skin was smoother. The shoulders sat higher. The walk was quicker. And somewhere in the back of the mind, we hold on to that version the way a woman might keep a dress in the back of the closet that she knows she will never wear again but cannot bring herself to give away. It is not the dress she misses. It is the woman who fit into it. Think about when you last caught your reflection unexpectedly. Not the mirror you use every morning, the one you have adjusted to, the one you tilt at just the right angle so the light is kind. But the other one, the shop window you walked past, the bathroom mirror in a friend's house, the photograph someone took when you were not ready. There is a moment in those encounters that lasts less than a second, a flash of not recognizing yourself, a tiny gap between who you think you are and who is looking back. That gap is where this chapter lives. Let us explore a story about this. There was a woman who had just turned 60. She lived alone in a small house with a garden that she tended in the mornings and a cat that followed her from room to room. She had been a teacher for 32 years. She had raised 2 children. She had buried her mother and, before that, her father. She had lived what most people would call a full life, though she rarely thought of it that way. She simply thought of it as her life. One evening, after a bath, she stood in the bathroom and wiped the steam from the mirror with the palm of her hand. And there, looking back at her, was a woman she did not know. The face was lined, the jaw had softened. The hair, still wet, clung thin and silver to her scalp. where once it had fallen thick and dark past her shoulders. The skin beneath her eyes was loose and faintly blue. The neck, the collarbones, the shoulders, all of it was different from the last time she had really looked. She stood very still. "Who are you?" she whispered. The woman in the mirror did not answer. She just stood there, dripping, 60 years old, in a bathroom with a fogged window and a towel that was getting cold. The younger version of herself was still somewhere inside. She could feel her. The woman who used to swim in the lake on Saturday mornings. The woman who carried both children up the stairs at the same time, one on each hip, laughing. The woman who danced at her sister's wedding until her feet bled and did not notice until she took off her shoes. That woman was in there. But she was not in the mirror. For a long time, the woman simply stood. She did not cry. She did not look away. She just looked. And then something small happened. She noticed the eyes. The same brown eyes that had been there at 20, at 40, at 50. The same eyes that had cried when her first child was born and could not breathe for 3 long seconds before the nurse cleared the passage. The same eyes that had laughed so hard at her mother's kitchen table one Christmas that tea came out of her nose, and everyone, even her mother, lost themselves in the kind of laughter that makes your stomach ache. The same eyes that had watched the sun rise from a hospital window on the morning she became a widow. The face had changed. The body had changed, but the eyes had not. She put her hand flat against the glass, against the woman in the mirror, and she said very quietly, "I know you." That was all. She dried off. She put on her robe. She went to bed. But something between her and her body was different after that. Not fixed, not healed, just different, a little closer to peace. What the woman in the bathroom discovered, without ever naming it, was something the Buddha spoke about more than 2,000 years ago. He called the body a house. Through many a birth in samsara have I wandered in vain, seeking the builder of this house. Repeated birth is indeed suffering. O house builder, you are seen. You will not build this house again, for your rafters are broken and your ridgepole shattered. Those words were spoken at the moment of the Buddha's awakening. He was describing liberation from the cycle of birth and death. But there is something in the image of the house that speaks to us in a smaller, quieter way tonight. Your body is a house, and like any house that has been lived in for 60 years, it shows the marks. The floors are scuffed. The paint is peeling near the windows. The door does not close the way it used to. Some rooms are drafty now, but every scratch on the floor tells you where the furniture was dragged on the day someone moved in. Every stain on the kitchen counter tells you what was cooked and for whom. The house is not falling apart. It is full of evidence that someone lived here, that someone loved here, that someone stayed. There is a woman who once said that she finally understood her body the night her furnace broke. It was February, and the house was old, and the furnace quit at 2 in the morning. She wrapped herself in every blanket she owned and sat in the kitchen, waiting for the repairman. And while she sat there, shivering, she looked around. She saw the kitchen she had cooked 10,000 meals in, the counter where her children had done homework, the window she had looked out of every morning for 27 years. The house was cold. The pipes were groaning. The floor was drafty. But she did not for 1 second think the house was worthless. She thought, this house kept us warm for 27 years. One cold night does not erase that. And then she thought, My body has kept me warm for 63 years. A few cold mornings do not erase that either. In Pali, rūpa carries one more shade of meaning that is worth sitting with tonight. Rūpa is sometimes described as that which is subject to deformation. That sounds clinical, almost cold. But think about it this way. A face that has been deformed by 60 years of smiling, of frowning, of squinting into the sun, of crying, of pressing into a pillow night after night, is not a damaged face. It is a face that has been used. A face that has fully participated in a life. Deformation in this sense is not destruction. It is the physical record of having shown up, of having been present, of having stayed in the room when it would have been easier to leave. Let us explore another story about this. This one comes from the Zen tradition. In a small monastery somewhere in the mountains, there were two monks, one old, one young. The monastery was simple. Stone walls, wooden beams, a garden of rocks and moss, and a single path that led down to a stream where they drew water each morning. The young monk had been given the task of cleaning the kitchen. In the corner, on a low shelf, there sat an old clay water jar. It had a crack running from the rim halfway down one side. Every time the young monk filled it, water seeped slowly through the crack and dripped onto the stone floor, and he had to mop it up. One morning he went to the old monk. "Teacher," he said, "the water jar is cracked. It loses water every day. May I replace it?" The old monk looked at him for a moment. Then he stood and walked with the young monk to the kitchen. He knelt beside the jar. He ran his finger along the crack. Then he pointed to the floor beside the shelf. "Tell me what you see," he said. The young monk looked down. Along the base of the wall, in the crack between the stone floor and the wooden shelf, there was a line of moss, soft, green, alive. It grew nowhere else in the kitchen, only there, only where the water dripped. The old monk said, "This jar has been cracked for 11 years. And for 11 years, it has watered that moss. The moss softened the wall. The wall no longer chips in winter. The kitchen is warmer because of it. Everything in this room has quietly adjusted to the crack. The crack is not a flaw. It is how this jar serves now." The young monk looked at the jar for a long time. He did not replace it. That evening, after the last bell had rung and the monastery was quiet, the young monk went back to the kitchen alone. He knelt beside the jar again. He watched the water seep through the crack, one slow drop at a time, and land on the moss. He had mopped that water up every day for 2 years. He had seen it as waste, as something leaking out that should have stayed in. But now, kneeling there in the dark kitchen, with the moonlight coming through the single window, he saw it differently. The water was not being lost, it was being given. The jar was not broken, it was generous. He sat there for a long time, listening to the drip, until the silence and the sound became the same thing. The old monk was speaking about more than a jar. He was speaking about what happens when something ages and changes and no longer works the way it was designed to. The crack in the jar is like the ache in the knee. It is like the stiffness in the shoulder that was not there 5 years ago. It is like the breath that comes shorter on the stairs. These are not signs that the body is failing. They are signs that the body is serving differently now. The water still flows. It just flows in a new direction. And where it flows, something unexpected grows. There is a tradition among the Aboriginal peoples of Australia that offers another way of seeing the body tonight. For tens of thousands of years, perhaps longer than any other continuous culture on Earth. The Aboriginal peoples have walked the land along paths they call songlines. These are not roads, they are songs. Their ancestors, they say, walked across the continent in the time of creation, and as they walked, they sang. They sang the name of every rock, every river, every hill, and in the singing, the land came into being. The world was not built, it was sung into existence, one step at a time. Your body has done something like this. Every step you have ever taken has written something into the world that was not there before. The path you wore across the kitchen floor over 30 years of mornings. The groove your hand left on the banister from a decade of walking upstairs to check on sleeping children. The wear on the driver's seat of a car you drove for 15 years. These are your songlines. The evidence that your body passed through this world and, in passing, shaped it. Every wrinkle on your face is a note in that song. Every scar is a verse. Every stiff joint is a chorus that was repeated so many times it left a mark. The Aboriginal elders say that walking the songlines keeps the land alive. That if the songs are forgotten, the land forgets itself. The land does not remember on its own. It needs the walker. It needs the voice. It needs someone to come back and sing the name of the creek bed that dries out every summer and fills again every winter. And the walker does not walk alone. The walker carries the song of everyone who walked that path before. Grandmother walked here, mother walked here, and now I walk here. The song gets longer with every generation, but it never loses its first note. In a small, quiet way, the same is true of your body. The marks it carries, the aches, the lines, the grey, these are not signs that it is dying. They are signs that it sang. Your body has been walking its own songline for 60 years or more, and every mark on it is a note in a song that no one else could have sung. Because no one else walked your path. No one else carried what you carried. No one else stood in that particular kitchen on that particular morning and felt the sunlight come through the window at just that angle. The song is yours, and the body that sang it is still here, still holding the melody, even now. A woman once told a friend of hers that she had not looked at herself below the neck in a mirror for almost 4 years. She showered with her eyes closed. She dressed quickly. She avoided the full-length mirror in the hallway, the way you might avoid a room in the house where something sad once happened. She was not vain. She was not ashamed. Exactly. She simply did not want to meet the woman who lived in the glass, because that woman was old. And she, on the inside, was not. Most of us avoid mirrors after a certain age. Not always consciously. We simply stop looking as long. We check the hair, the teeth, whatever needs checking, and we move on. We spend less time meeting our own eyes, as if we are afraid of what we might find there, or afraid of not finding what we used to see. But here is something worth trying. Not tonight, not when you are tired, but some morning when you have a moment. Look a little longer, not at the lines, not at the skin. Look at the eyes. They have not changed. They are the same eyes that opened on the very first morning of your life. They have watched every sunrise you have ever seen, every face you have ever loved, every ceiling you have ever stared at in the dark. The rest of the face has rearranged itself around them, the way a town rearranges itself around an old church that has been there since before anyone can remember. But the eyes remain. So, here is something simple to carry with you tonight. The next time you catch your reflection, anywhere, in any light. Instead of looking away, look a little longer. Find the eyes, stay with them for a breath or two, and let them remind you that the woman looking back is not a stranger. She is you. She has always been you, and she has seen everything. Let us pause here. Take a slow, deep breath. Let the air come in without forcing it, and let it leave without holding it back. Notice where your body is resting right now. The back of the head against the pillow, the shoulders against the mattress, the hands wherever you have placed them. You do not need to move. You do not need to adjust. Just notice. When you are ready, we will continue together. In the next chapter, we will sit with something that visits most of us in the quiet hours. The thing we often try hardest to push away, pain. There is a teaching in the Buddhist tradition that uses the image of two arrows. The Buddha told it to his monks one evening, and it has been passed down for more than 2,000 years because it describes something that almost everyone who has ever been in pain will recognize. He said, when an untrained person is struck by a painful feeling, it is as though they were shot with an arrow, and then, right afterward, they are shot with a second arrow. The first arrow is the pain itself, the raw sensation, the ache in the hip, the burning in the lower back, the sharp pull in the shoulder when you reach for something on the top shelf. That arrow, the Buddha said, you cannot avoid. It comes, it lands. It is part of having a body, but the second arrow is different. The second arrow is what you do with the pain after it arrives. The second arrow is the story you tell yourself about it. Why is this happening to me? It was not this bad yesterday. What if it gets worse? What if it never goes away? What if this is the beginning of the end? The second arrow is the fear, the frustration, the anger at your own body for betraying you. And this arrow, the Buddha said, you shoot into yourself. Most of us do not notice the second arrow. We think the whole thing is one experience. We think the pain and the suffering are the same thing, but they are not. The pain is in the body. The suffering is in the mind's refusal to let the pain be what it is. Tonight, lying here, some of you are feeling both arrows at once. The knee that aches, the back that stiffens, the neck that will not turn the way it used to. And underneath that, the quiet dread that this is not going to get better, that the body you counted on for so many years is slowly becoming a place you do not want to live in. The first arrow landed some time ago. The second arrow you may be shooting right now. In this bed, in the dark, without even knowing, you are holding the bow. Let us sit with this for a moment, not to fix it, just to see it clearly. We have a strange relationship with pain. We talk about it the way we talk about an intruder. The pain attacks, the pain strikes. We fight the pain. We battle chronic pain. We speak of it as if it is a war, and we are losing. And in that language, in that framing, the body becomes a battlefield. The place where something is going wrong. And we are the soldiers stuck inside it, tired and outnumbered and looking for a way out. Think about how you described your pain the last time someone asked. Did you say, "My back is killing me. My knees are giving out. My body is falling apart"? Every one of those phrases contains a war, a killing, a giving out, a falling apart. We do not even notice the violence in the words anymore. They are so ordinary that we say them the way we say good morning. But the body hears them, and the body tenses a little more each time. Because when you tell yourself every day that something is killing you, some part of you begins to believe it. But what if pain is not an invader? What if it is a messenger, Let us explore a story about this. There was a woman named Grace who had been a dancer, not a famous dancer. She had never been on a stage that seated more than 200 people. But for 26 years, from the time she was 19 until she was 45, she danced. She taught ballet to children in a studio above a hardware store. She performed in small productions at the community theater. She danced at weddings when no one asked her to, because the music moved through her body the way water moves through a pipe, without decision, without effort. It simply flowed. When she was 47, her lower back began to hurt. Not suddenly, not dramatically. It started as a dull weight, the kind you notice only when you stop moving. She stretched more. She took hot baths. She adjusted. By 50, the weight had become a presence. It was there when she woke up. It was there when she bent to tie her shoes. It was there when she lay down at night and tried to find a position, any position, where the pressure eased enough to let her sleep. By 55, she had stopped dancing entirely. She did not make a decision to stop. There was no last performance, no final bow. She simply stopped one day the way a clock stops when the battery runs out. Quietly, without ceremony. One morning, she woke up and realized she had not danced in 4 months, and she had not noticed, but the pain noticed. The pain was still there, every morning, like a guest who had moved in and had no plans to leave. The worst part, Grace said once, was the 10 seconds. Every morning, for about 10 seconds after she opened her eyes, she forgot about the pain. She was just awake. Just a woman lying in a bed on a Tuesday morning, and for those 10 seconds, she was free. Then the pain arrived, the way it always did, like a hand pressing down on the small of her back, and the day began. She hated those 10 seconds. She said they were cruel, because they reminded her of what it felt like to live without pain. And then they took it away. Her daughter once asked her what the pain felt like. Grace thought about it for a long time. Then she said, "It feels like someone put a stone inside my back. Not a sharp stone, a smooth one. The kind you find at the bottom of a river. It sits there all day, pressing against everything. And the worst part is not the weight of it. The worst part is that I keep expecting it to be gone. Every single morning, for 10 seconds, I expect to reach behind me and find the stone has been taken away in the night. And every morning it is still there. That is the part that breaks me, not the stone, the hope." One night, very late, she was lying in bed and the pain was keeping her awake. She had turned from her left side to her right and back again. She had put a pillow under her knees. She had tried lying flat on her back and staring at the ceiling. Nothing helped. And then, for no reason she could explain afterward, she stopped. She stopped trying to fix it. She stopped adjusting. She stopped fighting. She lay very still and she spoke to the pain. Not out loud, just quietly in her mind. "I know you are there," she said. "I know. I hear you." The pain did not go away. It did not lessen. It did not change at all. But something else changed. The war stopped. For the first time in years, she was not fighting her own body. She was not trying to push the pain away or pretend it was not there or bargain with it. She was just lying beside it, the way you might lie beside someone in a hospital bed, not able to fix what is wrong, but not willing to leave either. She fell asleep that night faster than she had in months. Grace did not know it, but what she did in that bed was the same thing the Buddha described in the Sutta. She put down the second arrow. The pain remained. The first arrow always remains. But she stopped adding suffering to it. She stopped telling herself stories about the pain. She stopped making it mean something about her future, her worth, her body's failure. She let the pain be pain and nothing more. And in that small act, something opened up. Not much, not a miracle. Just a little more room between her and the thing that hurt. This is what the Pali word Vedana points to. Vedana is one of the most misunderstood terms in Buddhist teaching. In English, we might translate it as feeling or sensation. But Vedana is not an emotion. It is not sadness or anger or joy. It is something more basic than that. It is the raw data of experience before the mind has done anything with it. When your knee aches, the ache itself is Vedana. It is just sensation, a signal moving through the body. It does not carry a message about your future. It does not mean you are falling apart. It does not mean the best years are behind you. It is simply the body reporting what is happening, the way a thermometer reports temperature, without caring whether the number is good or bad. When you put your hand on a hot stove, the Vedana is the heat, just the heat. The hand does not think. The hand does not tell a story. The hand simply reports hot. It is the mind that adds everything else. The panic, the blame, the memory of the last time you burned yourself. The fear that the burn will scar. But the mind does not leave Vedana alone. The mind grabs the sensation and wraps it in meaning. The mind says, this pain means I am getting old. This stiffness means I cannot do what I used to do. This ache in the morning means something is wrong with me. And suddenly, the raw sensation has become a story about loss, a story about decline, a story about a body that is failing. The Buddha's teaching is not that pain is an illusion. He never said that. He lived in a body that aged and ached and eventually died. What he said is that the story is optional. The pain comes. That is the first arrow. But the story you tell about the pain, the fear, the anger, the grief, that is the second arrow. And you do not have to shoot it. Let us explore another story about this. This one goes back to the years before the Buddha became the Buddha. After Siddhartha left the palace, after he saw the old man and the sick man and the dead man on the road, he spent 6 years in the forest trying to find a way beyond suffering. And during those 6 years, he did something that many people today still do with their bodies. He punished it. He joined a group of ascetics who believed that the way to freedom was through the body's destruction. If you could overcome the body, they said, if you could starve it and deny it and push it past every limit, the spirit would break free. And so Siddhartha tried. He ate almost nothing. Some accounts say he ate a single sesame seed a day, a single grain of rice. His ribs pressed outward against his skin, like the ribs of an old boat turned upside down on the shore. His eyes sank into his skull. His hair fell out. He could press his hand against his belly and feel his spine through the skin. He sat in the burning sun without shade. He sat in the cold rain without shelter. He held his breath until he nearly fainted. He slept on thorns. He did everything those teachers told him to do. He fought his body with everything he had. There is a passage in the ancient text that describes what he looked like during those years. His limbs became like the knotted joints of withered creepers. His backbone stood out like a string of beads. His ribs jutted out like the rafters of an old roofless barn. The gleam of his eyes sank far down in their sockets, the way the gleam of water can be seen far down in a deep well. His scalp shriveled and withered as a green gourd shrivels in the wind and sun. When he pressed his hand against his belly, he could feel his spine. When he tried to stand, he fell face down on the ground. When he rubbed his limbs with his hands, the hair, rotted at its roots, fell away from his body and nothing happened. No liberation, no awakening, no peace. Just pain upon pain upon pain. After 6 years, Siddhartha was sitting by a river, barely alive, when he heard a music teacher passing by in a boat. The teacher was speaking to a student about tuning a stringed instrument. If the string is too tight, the teacher said, it snaps. If it is too loose, it will not play. Only when the string is tuned to the middle does it make music. Siddhartha heard those words, and something shifted inside him. He realized that what he had been doing to his body was pulling the string too tight. He had been trying to break free of the body by breaking the body itself, and it had not worked, not because he had not tried hard enough, but because the approach was wrong. You cannot find peace by making war on the thing that carries you. Shortly after that, a young woman named Sujata came to the river. She had been walking to make an offering at a shrine, and when she saw Siddhartha sitting there, thin as a skeleton, barely breathing, she thought he was a tree spirit. She knelt and offered him a bowl of rice milk, simple food, the kind a mother makes for a sick child, warm and sweet, and meant to bring someone back to life. And Siddhartha did something that his fellow ascetics considered a betrayal. He ate it. He accepted nourishment. He allowed his body to be fed. His companions left him in disgust. They said he had given up, but he had not given up. He had given in. He had stopped fighting the body, and that was the beginning, not the end, of his path to awakening. This is one of the least told parts of the Buddha's story, and it is perhaps the most important for us tonight, because many of us are still doing what Siddhartha did in the forest, not with sesame seeds and thorns, but with the way we think about our pain. We fight it, we resent it, we push against it with pills and frustration, and the quiet belief that if we could just defeat the pain, we would be free. But the pain is not the prison. The war against the pain is the prison. In the Sufi tradition, the poet Rumi wrote something that has survived for 800 years, because it is true in a way that does not fade. He wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." Those words are not asking you to be grateful for your pain. They are not saying pain is good. They are saying something subtler, that the place where you are broken is also the place where you are open. The knee that aches has cracked open a space where something else can enter. Not more pain, but attention, care. The kind of tenderness you would give to a child who fell and scraped her knee. You would not yell at the knee. You would not tell it to stop hurting. You would kneel beside it and say, "Let me see. Show me where it hurts." Rumi also wrote, "The cure for pain is in the pain." Those 8 words have been repeated by millions of people in 8 centuries, and most of them did not understand what they meant until the pain came for them personally, which sounds impossible until you have lived with pain long enough to know what he meant. The cure is not the end of pain. The cure is the moment you stop turning away from it, the moment you turn toward it instead. The way Grace did, lying in her bed, when she finally said, "I hear you." There is a practice, very old, very simple, that comes from this understanding. It is not a meditation in any formal sense. It does not require any training or any particular posture. It requires only this, that you stop treating your body like an opponent. If there is a part of you that hurts right now, a knee, a hip, a shoulder. The lower back, the neck. You have probably spent the whole day trying not to think about it, or thinking about it with frustration, or thinking about it with fear. Tonight, just for a moment, try something different. Turn your attention toward it, not to fix it, not to diagnose it, just to be with it, the way you would sit with an old friend who is tired and does not need you to say anything, just needs you to stay. Place your attention there, gently, the way you would place your hand on a sleeping child's back, and say, quietly, on the inside, I know you are there. I am not going to fight you tonight. You do not need to say anything else. You do not need to feel anything particular. Just that small turning toward instead of away. That is enough. That is the second arrow coming down. Not the pain ending, but the war ending. And sometimes in the quiet that follows, sleep comes. Not because the body has been fixed, but because, for the first time in a long time, it has been heard. A woman who had lived with fibromyalgia for 12 years once described the night she stopped fighting. She said it was not dramatic. She did not have a revelation. She was just tired of being angry at her body, tired of going to bed every night as if she were walking into an argument she already knew she would lose. And that night, she said, I just stopped arguing. I said to my body, okay, you hurt. I know you hurt. What do you need? And her body, she said, did not answer with words, but it answered. It softened, just a fraction, just enough that she could breathe a little deeper. And she thought, maybe that is all it ever wanted, not to be fixed, just to be asked. Let us pause here. Take one more breath, a slow one. Let the air come in through the nose, fill the lungs, and leave through the mouth without any hurry. Feel your body settling. Feel the mattress under you. You are here. You are held. And nothing needs to be different right now. When you are ready, we will continue together. In the next chapter, we will turn our attention to specific parts of the body. The hands, the knees, the back. Each one has a story it has been waiting to tell. There is a line in the Dhammapada, the very first line, in fact, that says, we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. Those words have been quoted so many times that they have become almost invisible. The way a painting hung in the same spot for 30 years becomes part of the wall. But tonight, lying here, let us hear them differently. Let us change one word. We are what we did. All that we are arises from what we did. With our bodies, we made the world, not the whole world. You did not build bridges or skyscrapers or monuments, but you built the part of the world that mattered most, the kitchen that was clean when the children came home from school, the garden that bloomed because someone knelt in the dirt every spring and planted seeds with bare hands, the bed that was made every morning, not because anyone was coming, but because making the bed was how the day began. The world you built was not built with thoughts. It was built with hands and knees and backs and feet that carried you from room to room, from year to year, without ever stopping to ask whether anyone noticed. Tonight, let us talk about those parts of the body, not as medical problems, not as joints that need replacing or muscles that need stretching, but as workers, as servants who gave everything they had and never once asked for a day off. Start with the hands. Look at them if you can, or just feel them wherever they are resting. Feel the weight of them, the bones inside them, the skin over the knuckles. These hands have a history that no document could hold. How many doors have they opened? Not just the front door of the house, though they opened that one 10,000 times, but the doors that mattered. The car door for a child on the first day of school. The hospital door on the night someone you loved was brought in. The door of a house that was no longer yours on the day you left it for the last time. How many faces have these hands touched? A child's forehead at 3 in the morning, checking for fever. A husband's cheek on a Sunday morning when neither of you had anywhere to be. A mother's hand in a hospital bed, held for hours, long after she stopped knowing you were there. These hands wrote letters that someone kept in a drawer for 20 years. These hands buttoned coats and tied shoes and braided hair and wiped counters and folded laundry that no one ever thanked them for folding. These hands clapped at school plays and gripped steering wheels through rainstorms and held other hands through funerals and covered mouths during laughter that came when laughter was not expected and was all the more precious for it. These hands peeled potatoes on Thanksgiving morning while everyone else was still asleep. These hands zipped up winter coats and pulled on rain boots and packed lunches with notes inside that said, "I love you" in handwriting. That got shakier over the years, but never stopped. These hands held a pen to sign papers they did not want to sign. Divorce papers, hospital forms, the deed to a house that had to be sold. These hands shook when they were afraid and steadied themselves when someone else was more afraid. These hands prayed in churches and in kitchens and in parking lots and in the dark, holding nothing but air and hope. These hands are not what they were. The grip is weaker. The fingers are stiffer in the morning. The skin is thinner. But the record of what they have done is written into every line and every joint and every small scar that came from a kitchen knife or a garden thorn or a sewing needle that slipped. Let us explore a story about this. There was a woman named Margaret who was 70 years old and lived in a house with a small yard that she had tended for 43 years. She had planted the apple tree in the corner the year her second child was born. She had laid the stone path from the back door to the garden shed herself, one flat stone at a time, over the course of a single summer. She had knelt in that yard so many times that she knew the soil by feel, which part held water, which part drained, where the clay was thick and where it turned to sand. Her knees had done all of that kneeling, and now her knees were telling her they were done. One afternoon, her granddaughter, who was 5, was visiting. They were sitting in the yard on the old wooden bench that Margaret's husband had built before he died. The granddaughter was eating an apple from the tree. Margaret was watching her and feeling the ache in both knees that had become so familiar it was almost a companion. "Grandma," the girl said, looking up with apple juice on her chin. "Why do you walk so slow?" Margaret looked down at her knees. She had been asked this question before by doctors, by friends, by her own children, and she had always answered the same way: bad knees, arthritis, getting old. But this time, sitting in the yard she had built with those knees, looking at the tree she had planted with those hands, she said something different. "Because these knees have knelt 1,000 times for people I love." The girl did not understand. She just nodded and went back to her apple. But Margaret sat with those words for a long time after. She did not know where they came from. She had never said anything like that before. All her life, when people asked about her knees, she talked about cartilage and inflammation and cortisone shots. She talked about them the way you talk about a car that needs repairs. But this time, sitting beside her granddaughter in the yard she had built with her own body, she did not think about what was wrong with her knees. She thought about what her knees had done. She looked at her knees the way you might look at a tool that has been used so much the handle is smooth. Not broken, finished. These knees had knelt to plant every flower in this yard. They had knelt to pick up 100,000 dropped toys, dropped spoons, dropped pacifiers. They had knelt beside beds to say prayers with children who were afraid of the dark. They had knelt to scrub floors that no one remembered were scrubbed. They had knelt in churches and in gardens and in hospital rooms and beside bathtubs where small children splashed and laughed. The knees were not failing. The knees had given. In the Pali language, there is a word for this. Kāyakamma. It means the actions of the body. In Buddhist teaching, kamma, what most people know as karma, is not a cosmic ledger keeping score. It is simply this: every action leaves a trace. Every act of the body writes something into the world that was not there before. And the traces left by a body that has spent 60 or 70 years kneeling to serve, carrying to provide, reaching to comfort, those traces are kāyakamma. They are the body's record of goodness. Your back has a kāyakamma. It carried grocery bags upstairs for decades. It bent over cribs at 2 in the morning. It lifted boxes on moving day. It curved around sleeping children on the couch. It straightened when you needed to be strong and did not feel strong. Every ache in that back is a mark left by an act of service that no one wrote down, but the body itself remembered. Your feet have a kāyakamma. They paced the hallway when the baby had colic. They walked the dog in the rain because the dog needed walking, and no one else was going to do it. They stood in lines at grocery stores and school offices and pharmacies. They crossed parking lots in the cold. They carried you to 1,000 places you did not want to go, but went anyway, because someone needed you there. They walked across the house at midnight to lock the door you were not sure you had locked. They walked to the mailbox on the day you were waiting for news you were afraid to receive. They walked you out of rooms where you had just received that news, one foot in front of the other, because the feet knew that the only way through grief was to keep moving, even when the mind had stopped. Your shoulders have a kāyakamma. They carried bags of groceries when you had to park 4 blocks away because the lot was full. They carried sleeping children from car seats to beds, dead weight draped against your chest, warm breath against your neck. They held the phone to your ear during conversations that lasted 3 hours and left you empty. They squared themselves when you walked into rooms where you did not feel welcome but had to be present anyway. They curled forward at night when you were too tired to sit up straight and the day had taken everything. None of these things made the news. None of them were recorded in any book, but the body recorded them in the stiffness of the joints, in the ache of the lower back, in the creak of the knees every morning. These are not signs of failure. They are the body's handwriting, the record it kept when no one else was keeping one. Let us explore another story about this. This one comes from far across the ocean. Among the Polynesian peoples of the Pacific, there is a tradition of building great canoes called waka. These are not small boats. They are ocean-going vessels, carved from single trees, fitted with sails woven from pandanus leaves. and designed to carry entire families across thousands of miles of open water. For centuries, these waka carried people from island to island, through storms and calms, through currents that could kill and winds that could save, across a stretch of ocean so vast that the Europeans, who arrived later, could not believe anyone had crossed it without instruments. On one island, there was an old waka that had been pulled up onto the beach for the last time. Its hull was cracked along one side. The wood was soft with salt and age. The sail was long gone. It sat on the sand the way an old chair sits on a porch, too worn to use, too full of memory to move. The younger men of the village wanted to burn it. It was taking up space on the beach. It was an eyesore, they said. It served no purpose. But there was an old woman in the village, a grandmother who had been born on that canoe during a crossing, whose mother had given birth to her on the open ocean while the stars turned overhead. She walked to the beach and stood beside the waka and put her hand on its hull the way you might put your hand on the shoulder of someone who has worked very hard and is very tired. This waka carried 40 families across the sea, she said. It does not need to sail again, but it needs to be remembered. The village was quiet for a long time after she spoke. The younger men looked at each other. One of them, her own grandson, walked to the waka and knelt beside it. He ran his hand along the crack in the hull. He could feel the salt of 100 crossings in the grain of the wood. He could see where the ropes had worn grooves into the gunwale from years of straining against the wind. He stood up and said, "She is right. This is not firewood. This is a grandfather." The men did not burn the waka. They moved it to the center of the village. They placed it where everyone could see it. Not as a boat, as a monument. Children climbed on it. Elders sat beside it in the shade and told the stories of the crossings. Rain fell on it and sun bleached it, and birds nested in the cracks where the wood had opened up. And the waka stood there, year after year, a reminder that something old and cracked and no longer able to do what it once did can still stand at the center of a life and say, "I brought you here." Your body is that waka. It is cracked in places. The wood is soft. The sail is gone. But it carried you across every ocean you have ever crossed. The ocean of raising children. The ocean of losing parents. The ocean of working and loving and grieving and starting over. It does not need to sail fast anymore. It does not need to be smooth and new. But it deserves to stand at the center of your life, not pushed to the side, not apologized for, not hidden, honored for the crossing it made. In the Bhagavad Gita, one of the oldest spiritual texts in the world, there is a verse that says, "As a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul accepts new bodies, giving up the old and useless ones." That verse is usually read as a teaching about reincarnation, about the soul moving from one body to the next, the way a person changes clothes. But tonight, let us hear it differently. Let us think about the old garment, not the new one, the old one. When you take off a coat you have worn for 30 years, a coat that kept you warm through winters you barely survived, a coat that smelled like your kitchen and your children and your life, you do not throw it in the trash. You fold it. You set it down carefully. Maybe you hold it for a moment before you let it go, because that coat was not just fabric. It was a companion. It was there for everything. Your body is that coat. And even if it is worn now, even if the seams are coming loose and the color has faded and it does not keep the cold out the way it used to, it deserves to be folded with care, not discarded, not cursed, folded, honored, set down gently when the time comes. We spoke in the last chapter about the moment when Sujata offered a bowl of rice milk to Siddhartha after his 6 years of starving in the forest. That bowl of rice milk is one of the most important moments in the entire Buddhist tradition, and it is easy to miss why. Siddhartha had spent 6 years punishing his body, starving it, denying it, treating it as the enemy of his awakening, and none of it worked. The enlightenment he sought did not come through the body's suffering. It came after he stopped making the body suffer. After he accepted a simple bowl of warm food from a woman who saw a starving man and did the most natural thing in the world. She fed him. Think about what that means. Not the theology of it, not the doctrine, just the simple human fact of it. A woman saw a body in pain and she gave it food. She did not ask what he believed. She did not ask what he was seeking. She did not ask him to earn it. She saw suffering and she answered it with a bowl of something warm. And that answer, that small act of kindness toward a body that had been treated cruelly for 6 years, turned out to be the hinge on which the entire history of Buddhism swings. That act, that simple act of nourishment, is described in the texts as one of only 2 meals in the Buddha's entire life that bore the greatest merit, not the elaborate offerings that came later, after he was famous, after he had thousands of followers. A bowl of rice milk, given quietly by an ordinary woman to a body that was nearly dead. The lesson is not complicated. The body is not the enemy. The body is not the obstacle. The body is the ground you stand on. It is the earth beneath the tree. And the Buddha did not awaken by destroying the earth. He awakened by sitting on it, by trusting it to hold him, by letting it be what it was, imperfect and solid and enough. And when you stop fighting the body, when you stop starving it of kindness, when you offer it the simplest nourishment, a warm meal, a soft bed, a moment of rest, you are not giving up. You are beginning. You are doing what the Buddha did on the night of his awakening. You are sitting down on the ground of your own body and saying, "This is where I will stay. This is enough. This will hold me." So here is something simple to carry with you tonight. Place your hands wherever they are comfortable. On your lap, on your chest, on the bed beside you. Feel them resting. Feel how warm they are. And know this: these hands have done enough. They do not need to do anything more tonight. Not one more task. Not one more chore. Not one more act of service. They have served for decades. They have held and carried and cleaned and comforted and built and repaired and wiped tears and opened doors. Tonight, they can simply rest. The same is true of the knees. The same is true of the back. The same is true of every part of you that aches. It aches because it worked. And it worked because you showed up. Every single day, you showed up. Let us pause here. Take a slow breath. Let the weight of your body settle a little deeper into the mattress. Feel gravity doing its quiet work, holding you down, not to trap you, but to keep you close. You do not need to go anywhere right now. You do not need to carry anything. Just rest here, in this body, in this bed, and let the body do what it knows how to do. Hold you, the way it always has. When you are ready, we will continue together. In the next chapter, we will sit with a question that many of us have carried for a long time. Why does rest feel like giving up? There is a question that comes to many of us late at night, when the house is quiet and the body is asking to lie down, and it is this: am I allowed to rest? Not am I tired? We know the answer to that. The answer to that has been yes for years. But am I allowed? Is it permitted? Have I done enough today to earn the right to stop moving? It is a strange question when you say it out loud. Of course you are allowed to rest. You are an adult in your own home. No one is standing over you with a checklist. No one is grading your day. But the feeling is there anyway, like a low hum you cannot locate, a pressure in the chest that tightens. Every time you sit down in the middle of the afternoon and do nothing. A voice, not loud, not cruel, just steady, that says, you should be doing something. Most women over 50 know that voice. It is not a voice they chose. It was given to them early, the way you are given your name. And by the time they were old enough to question it, it had already moved in and unpacked its bags and started rearranging the furniture. The voice was their mother's voice, or their grandmother's voice, or the voice of a culture that measured a woman's worth by how much she gave and how little she asked for in return. Rest, for many women, was not a reward. It was a confession. It meant you had failed to find something useful to do. It meant you were lazy or selfish or soft. It meant you had given up. And so they kept moving. They kept cleaning the house that was already clean. They kept cooking meals that no one was hungry for. They kept folding laundry at 10 o'clock at night because sitting still felt more dangerous than being tired. If that voice sounds familiar, this chapter is for you. And if you are lying here tonight, feeling guilty for lying here, for not being up, for not doing something productive, with the last hours of the day, then this chapter is especially for you. Because what follows is not a trick to help you rest better. It is permission. Permission you have needed for a very long time, and that no one, not even you, has been willing to give. In the Buddhist tradition, there is a teaching that says, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. Those words are often quoted, often printed on cards and magnets and coffee mugs, and almost never applied to the body. We hear them, and we think about loving ourselves emotionally, forgiving ourselves, being kinder to our minds. But the body is always left out of the conversation. The body is still expected to earn its rest. The body is still expected to keep going until it collapses. And even then, even lying in a hospital bed, many women will apologize for being trouble. Tonight, let us include the body in the conversation. Let us say those words again slowly. You yourself deserve your love and affection. You the body, you the knees, you the back, you the shoulders that have carried everything and asked for nothing. You deserve rest. Not tomorrow, not after the house is clean. Now let us explore a story about this. There was a woman named Helen who was 62 years old and had been a widow for 2 years. Her husband had died on a Tuesday morning in April, and since that morning, she had not stopped moving. She cleaned out his closet the week after the funeral. She repainted the bedroom. She reorganized the kitchen drawers. She signed up for a gardening class and a book club and a volunteer shift at the library. She was busy every hour of every day, and if anyone asked how she was doing, she said, "Fine, keeping busy, staying active." She did not say what she was actually doing, which was running. Not from grief, exactly, though grief was part of it, but from stillness. Because stillness was where the emptiness lived, and the emptiness was enormous. It was the size of the chair where her husband used to sit. It was the size of the other side of the bed. It was the size of the silence between 6 in the evening and 10 at night. The hours they used to spend together, watching television and saying nothing, which had seemed like nothing at the time and now seemed like everything. One afternoon in June, on a day when the gardening class was cancelled and the library did not need her and the house was clean and there was nothing left to organize, Helen sat down on the sofa. She sat there for a moment. Then she lay down. She put a cushion under her head and she lay there on a Wednesday afternoon at 2 o'clock, doing nothing. The guilt arrived in less than a minute. It came the way it always came, not as a thought, but as a feeling in the body, a tightness in the stomach, a restlessness in the legs, as if the sofa itself were made of something uncomfortable. She should get up. She should do something. There were baseboards that needed wiping. There was a closet that could be reorganized. There was always something. She lay there and stared at the ceiling and felt the sunlight coming through the curtains. The clock on the wall ticked. The house was so quiet she could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. She had not heard that sound in months. She had been too busy to hear anything. She thought about her friend Carol, who had told her once over coffee, "Rest is not indulgence, Helen. Rest is strategy." Carol had read that somewhere, or heard it on a podcast, and she said it as if it were a fact, the way you might say the earth goes around the sun. And Helen had nodded and said, "I know, you are right," and had gone home and cleaned the oven. Because the truth was, rest is not indulgence sounded right in theory, but it did not work in practice. Not for Helen, not for women like Helen, who had spent their whole lives being useful. Useful was not just what she did, it was who she was. Take away the usefulness, and what was left? A 62-year-old woman lying on a sofa in an empty house on a Wednesday afternoon. That was not rest, that was defeat. And then, lying there, staring at the ceiling, she thought of her daughter. Her daughter was 34 and lived 3 states away and worked too hard and never slept enough. And Helen thought, if my daughter called me right now and said, "Mom, I am so tired I can barely stand," what would I say? She knew exactly what she would say. She would say, "Lie down, sweetheart. Close your eyes. Everything else can wait." She would say it without hesitation, without guilt, without conditions. She would say it because her daughter deserved to rest, and anyone who could not see that was wrong. So why, Helen thought, lying on that sofa, do I not say the same thing to myself? She did not have an answer. She just lay there. The sunlight moved across the carpet. The clock ticked, the refrigerator hummed, and Helen cried. Not the loud crying of the funeral, when everyone was watching and she had to hold it together, but the quiet crying of a woman who has just realized she has been punishing herself for being human. The tears ran sideways into the cushion, and she did not wipe them because there was no one to see them, and because, for once, she did not feel the need to clean anything up. She lay on that sofa for 2 hours. She did not sleep. She did not read. She did not think about anything in particular. She just lay there and let the afternoon pass over her like a slow tide. And when she finally got up at 4 o'clock and walked to the kitchen to make tea, something in her body felt different, lighter. Not because the grief was gone, but because she had stopped carrying the guilt on top of it. And for the first time in a very long time, she did not apologize to anyone for having stopped. What Helen was beginning to discover, without any Buddhist vocabulary, without any tradition or teaching to guide her, was something the Buddha called karuṇā, compassion. But not compassion directed outward, toward the sick, the poor, the suffering. Compassion directed inward, toward herself, toward her own body, toward the 62-year-old woman who was tired and had been tired for years and had never once given herself permission to stop. In the Buddhist tradition, karuṇā is one of the four immeasurables, the four qualities that the Buddha said were boundless, limitless, meant to extend in every direction: loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity. Most people, when they hear about these qualities, think of them as things you give to others. You send loving kindness to the world. You feel compassion for those who suffer. But the Buddha was very clear on this point. He said, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. You yourself. Not after you have finished the laundry. Not after you have earned it. Not when you have run out of other people to take care of. Now, tonight, as you are, and that includes your body. It is a strange thing. How easy it is to feel compassion for another person's tired body, and how difficult it is to feel it for your own. If a friend told you she had not sat down all day, you would tell her to rest. If your mother told you her back was aching, you would bring her a cushion. If a stranger collapsed on the sidewalk, you would kneel beside them and ask what they needed. But when your own body says, I am tired, the answer is usually, not yet. Let us explore another story about this. This one comes from a Zen monastery. In a small monastery in the mountains, there was an old teacher who had been practicing for more than 40 years. Every morning, he rose before dawn and sat in meditation. Every afternoon, he swept the garden paths with a bamboo broom. Every evening, he taught the younger monks. His days were the same, one season to the next, and the younger monks admired him the way you admire a clock that never stops ticking. One morning, a young monk came to the meditation hall and found the old teacher's cushion empty. He waited. The bell rang. The other monks arrived. The cushion remained empty. After the sitting, the young monk went looking for the old teacher and found him in his room, lying on his mat, eyes closed. Teacher, the young monk said, are you unwell? The old teacher opened his eyes. No, he said, I am resting. The young monk was confused. But it is time for meditation, he said. The old teacher looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, how many hours do you meditate each day? 4, the young monk said. Sometimes 5. And what is meditation? The old teacher asked. The young monk recited what he had been taught. Meditation is the practice of awareness, he said. Mindfulness of breath, of body, of mind. It is listening to what arises without grasping or pushing away. The old teacher nodded. Good, he said. And this morning, I listened to my body, and my body said, rest, so I am resting. The young monk frowned. But that is not meditation, he said. The old teacher closed his eyes again. That, he said, is the deepest meditation there is. The young monk stood in the doorway for a long time after the old teacher closed his eyes. He did not know what to do with what he had heard. Everything he had been taught said that practice was effort, that you sat through the pain, that you pushed through the tiredness, that the body was an obstacle the mind had to overcome. And here was his teacher, the man who had taught him everything he knew, lying on a mat in the middle of the morning, saying that rest was practice, that stopping was not stopping at all. He went back to the meditation hall and sat on his cushion. But he could not concentrate. All he could think about was the old teacher's empty cushion beside him, and how the empty cushion, somehow, seemed more full of teaching than any lecture he had ever heard. There is a Pali word for what the old teacher was practicing. It is passaddhi. It means tranquility, or calm, or the deep settling of the body and mind that comes when you stop resisting what is. And passaddhi is not a luxury in the Buddhist path. It is not something you earn after years of effort. It is one of the 7 factors of awakening. One of the 7 qualities that the Buddha said were necessary for enlightenment. Think about that for a moment. Rest is not the opposite of awakening. Rest is one of its conditions. The body that is fighting itself, the body that is tense with guilt, the body that will not allow itself to be still, cannot awaken. It is too busy with the war. Passaddhi is what happens when the war ends, when the body is allowed to settle, when the mind stops demanding that the body do more, be more, give more. In that settling, in that quiet, something becomes possible that was not possible before. Not through effort, through release. Nearly 2,000 years after the Buddha, on the other side of the world, a Roman emperor named Marcus Aurelius wrote something in a leather journal. While he was camped with his army along the frozen Danube River, he was old, he was sick. His body ached from years of campaigns and cold nights in tents that leaked. He had lost friends, he had buried a son, his joints ached and his digestion was failing, and the physicians gave him remedies that did not work. And late at night, by the light of an oil lamp, while the wind howled outside and his soldiers slept in their tents, he opened his journal and wrote, "Do not despise death, but be well content with it, since this too is one of those things that nature wills." Marcus Aurelius was not a Buddhist. He was a Stoic, a follower of a tradition that taught acceptance of what cannot be changed. But what he wrote that night in his tent, while his body ached and the wind pressed against the canvas, sounds like something the old Zen teacher might have said. Do not despise the body's tiredness. Be well content with it. It is natural. It is what the body does after it has carried an empire, or a family, or a life. It slows, it aches, it asks to lie down, and that asking is not weakness. It is the body being honest. The body has always been more honest than the mind. Marcus Aurelius did not write those words from a palace. He wrote them from a tent. He wrote them in pain. He wrote them knowing that his body was not going to get better, that the campaigns would continue, that the cold would not ease, and that eventually, not long from that night, his body would stop entirely. And still he wrote, "Be well content with it," not because he had given up, but because he understood something that most of us take a lifetime to learn, that accepting the body's limits is not defeat. It is the last and hardest form of honesty. He was the most powerful man in the world, and he could not make his body stop hurting. He could command legions and govern provinces and change the laws of an empire, but he could not command his knees to stop aching in the morning. And instead of raging against that, he sat with it. He let it be what it was. He wrote it down honestly, in a journal no one was supposed to read, and in doing so, he gave permission to every tired person who came after him. Permission to stop pretending. Permission to be tired. So here is something simple for tonight. If your body is tired, you do not need anyone's permission to rest. Not your mother's voice in your head. Not the culture that told you busy was better. Not the part of you that still believes lying down at 2 in the afternoon makes you lazy. None of them get a vote tonight. Just rest. The way the old teacher rested on his mat while the morning bell rang without him. The way Helen finally rested on that sofa while the afternoon light moved across the carpet. The way the emperor rested in his tent while the empire carried on without him for one night. The way the body has been asking you to rest for longer than you want to admit. You do not need to earn this. You do not need to finish something first. You do not need to deserve it. You already deserve it. You have always deserved it. The Buddha said so. The emperor said so. And tonight, lying here, your body is saying so too. Listen to it. It has never lied to you. Let us pause here. Take a breath, a slow one. Feel the weight of you against the bed. Feel how the mattress holds you without asking anything in return. That is what rest looks like. Something holding you. Something asking nothing. Let that be enough for now. When you are ready, we will continue together. In the next chapter, we will sit with something quiet and difficult. The grief of looking back at a body that used to move differently, that used to feel differently, that used to be yours in a way it no longer seems to be. And we will find, perhaps, that the grief is not what we thought it was. A woman once wrote, in a letter she never sent, "It is hard not to grieve our youth and mobility." She wrote it late at night, on a piece of paper she found in the kitchen drawer. With a pen that was running out of ink, she did not know who she was writing to. Maybe herself, maybe the woman she used to be, maybe no one at all. She just needed to say it somewhere. It is hard, not impossible, not unbearable, just hard. The kind of hard that does not announce itself. The kind that sits in the corner of the room and waits for you to notice it. And when you do, it does not explain itself. It just looks at you and says, "I know. I have been here the whole time." Tonight we are going to sit with that grief. Not the grief of losing someone else. Not the grief of death, which is enormous and has its own name and its own rituals and its own chapter in every book about suffering. But a quieter grief, a grief that does not get a funeral. The grief of losing the body you used to have, while you are still living in the one that replaced it. We have words for the big griefs. We have bereavement and loss and mourning. We have rituals. We have funerals and wakes and Shiva and memorial services. We have cards that say, "Thinking of you in this difficult time." But there is no card for the grief of looking at your own hands and not recognizing them. There is no ritual for the morning you realize you can no longer run. There is no ceremony for the day your body stops being the body you knew. This is a grief that most people do not talk about, not because it is shameful, but because it feels small next to the other griefs. Next to the death of a parent, next to the end of a marriage, next to the illness of a child, the grief of not being able to climb stairs without stopping halfway seems almost ridiculous, almost embarrassing. Who am I to grieve a stiff knee when people are grieving husbands and daughters and sons? And so the grief goes underground. It lives in the bathroom mirror and the old photograph and the pair of shoes in the closet that you have not worn in 5 years because your feet have changed shape. It lives in the small daily moments of noticing that you are not who you were and saying nothing about it and getting on with your day. But tonight, you do not have to get on with your day. Tonight, you can sit with it. You can let it be what it is. And what it is, if you look at it honestly, is love. Let us explore a story about this. There was a woman named Diane who had been a swimmer. Not a competitive swimmer, though she had won a few ribbons in college. She was the kind of swimmer who swam because her body asked for it. 3 mornings a week, For more than 30 years, she drove to the public pool before it opened, before the lane lines were crowded with people doing laps, and she swam. She loved the moment just before she dove in, standing at the edge of the pool, with her toes curled over the tile, looking at the flat, still surface of the water. The pool at that hour was almost always empty. The water was so still it looked like glass. And then she would dive, and the glass would break, and she would be inside it. And for 30 minutes, the world was nothing but water and breath and the pull of her arms through the blue. She was 57 when her right shoulder began to hurt. It started as a pinch at the top of her stroke, a small grab of pain when her arm reached its highest point. She adjusted her form. She shortened her reach. She switched from freestyle to breaststroke. She adjusted again and again, the way she had adjusted everything in her life, quietly, without complaint, making room for whatever came. By the time she was 59, she could not raise her right arm above her head. She still drove to the pool. She still parked in the same spot, the one under the oak tree at the far end of the lot. She still walked through the lobby and past the locker room and through the door to the deck. But she did not dive anymore. She could not. The shoulder would not allow it. One morning in February, she stood at the edge of the pool and looked at the water. It was still, it was blue. It was exactly the way it had looked when she was 25, and could cut through it like something made for water. She remembered that feeling, the speed, the cleanness of it, the way the water parted for her as if it had been waiting. And standing there, 59 years old, with a shoulder that would not rise, and a body that moved at half the speed it used to, she cried. She did not cry loudly. She stood at the edge of the pool, and tears ran down her face and dripped onto the tile. And she did not wipe them because her hands were at her sides, and because, for once, she did not care who saw. She was not crying because of the shoulder. She was crying because the woman who used to dive into this pool without thinking, the woman whose body obeyed her without hesitation, the woman who felt the water open for her like a door, that woman was gone, and no amount of physical therapy or cortisone or adjustment was going to bring her back. She stood there for a long time. She thought about the first time she ever dove into a pool. She was 12, summer camp in upstate New York. The instructor told her to point her hands and tuck her chin and just go, and she went. And the water took her in, and she came up laughing, and her hair was plastered to her face, and the other girls clapped. She thought about the morning she swam while pregnant with her daughter, 8 months along, enormous and slow, the water holding the weight that her back could not. She thought about the afternoon she swam a mile without stopping on her 50th birthday, alone in the pool, no one watching, and how she sat in the car afterward and felt so alive. She did not start the engine for 10 minutes. All of that was in the water. All of that was in the body that could no longer dive. Long enough that the light coming through the high windows shifted from grey to gold. Long enough that the first other swimmer arrived and set down his bag and began stretching by the far lane. Long enough that the water, which had been perfectly still, began to move with the hum of the filtration system, tiny ripples crossing the surface like thoughts. And then Diane did something that surprised her. She walked to the steps, not the diving end. The shallow end, where the metal railing goes down into the water, and there are 3 concrete steps with rubber grips. She held the railing with her good arm, and she walked down the steps, one at a time, into the water. It was cold. It was always cold at that hour. She felt it climb her legs, her waist, her ribs. She felt it close around her chest. And then she was in, not diving, not cutting, just standing in the water, up to her shoulders, breathing. She pushed off the wall and began to swim, slowly, carefully. Her right arm did not reach as high. Her left arm did most of the work. The stroke was lopsided and ugly, and nothing like the stroke she used to have. She was slow. She could feel how slow she was. Every lap took twice as long as it used to. Her breathing was louder. Her turns were clumsy. She bumped the lane rope once and had to stop and untangle her fingers from it. But she swam. She swam 4 laps, then 6, then 10. And somewhere around the 8th lap, something shifted. Not in the shoulder, in the mind. She stopped comparing. She stopped measuring this swim against every other swim she had ever taken. She stopped hearing the ghost of the woman who used to be fast. And she just swam. Slowly, badly, beautifully. When she got out, she sat on the bench by the locker room. Her hair was dripping. Her shoulder ached. Her lungs were still catching up. She could hear the pool filter humming and the echo of water lapping against the gutter. The other swimmer was doing butterfly in the far lane, fast and clean, the way she used to be fast and clean. She watched him for a moment. She did not feel envy. She felt something closer to gratitude. Gratitude that the water was still there, that it still held her, that it did not care how fast she was or how high her arm reached. It just let her in. She said, quietly, to no one, "I am not the woman who swam fast. I am the woman who still swims." In the Pali language, the word for grief is soka, and the Buddha did not say soka was wrong. He did not say, "Do not grieve." He did not tell his monks to be above grief, or beyond grief, or to meditate their way past grief. He said something more careful than that. He said that soka comes, that it is one of the conditions of being alive, that when you love something and it changes, the heart responds with soka. That is natural, that is human, that is what hearts do. What the Buddha cautioned against was not the grief itself, but the way we sometimes merge with it, the way we become the grief, the way we let the soka swallow us whole until there is no difference between the grief and the person who is grieving. Soka comes, the teaching says, and soka goes, but you remain. The grief passes through you the way weather passes through a valley. The valley does not become the storm. The valley is still there when the storm moves on. And so are you. You were here before this grief arrived. You will be here after it softens. The grief is real, but it is not all of you. It is one weather in a long, long life of weathers. All conditioned things are impermanent, the Dhammapada says. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. Those words are not telling you to stop feeling. They are telling you that the grief, like the body it mourns, is also impermanent. It will not stay at this intensity forever. It will soften, not because you pushed it away, but because that is what all conditioned things do. They change. Even grief changes. Even the grief of looking at your own body and not recognizing it. Even that. Let us explore another story about this. This one comes from the Hindu tradition. In a small house in a village in India, there lived an old woman who was 78 years old. She had been a widow for 11 years. She lived alone in 2 rooms with a window that faced east, so that every morning the sunlight came in and fell across the bed where she slept, and the wooden chest where she kept her saris. She had many saris. Some were new, gifts from her children who lived in the city. But the ones she valued most were the old ones, the ones folded at the bottom of the chest, wrapped in muslin, smelling of camphor and thyme. She took them out once a year, on a day she chose herself, and she unfolded them one by one on the bed and looked at them. There was the red silk she wore on her wedding day. The gold thread had dulled and the silk had thinned in places, but it still held its color, the way a sunset holds its color even as it fades. There was the white cotton she wore to her husband's funeral, plain and unadorned, the simplest garment she had ever put on, and the heaviest thing she had ever carried. There was the green sari she wore on the day her first son was born, the fabric still carrying a faint stain near the hem from the tea she spilled. When the nurse told her it was a boy, she folded each one carefully. She smoothed the creases with her palms. She held each one against her chest for a moment before setting it back in the chest. She did not wear them anymore. Her body had changed. The waist was wider, the shoulders were narrower. The arms that used to drape the fabric in 6 precise folds now shook when they reached above the head. These saris belonged to a body that no longer existed. In the Bhagavad Gita, the sacred Hindu text, Lord Krishna tells the warrior Arjuna, as a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul accepts new bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. It is one of the most famous verses in all of Hindu scripture. The body is a garment. The soul puts it on, wears it for a lifetime, and when the garment is worn out, the soul sets it aside and takes a new one. The old woman knew this verse by heart. She had heard it at every funeral she had ever attended. She believed it, but she also believed something else, something she had never heard anyone say but felt was true. Krishna says the body is a garment, she said once to her daughter-in-law, who had come to help her put the saris away. But he did not say you cannot fold it with care before you let it go. The daughter-in-law looked at her. She had never heard her mother-in-law speak this way. The old woman was usually quiet about matters of faith. She prayed in the mornings. She lit incense. She read from the Gita on Sundays. But she did not make speeches. She did not interpret scripture. She simply lived inside it, the way a fish lives inside water, without needing to describe what water is. But today, holding that wedding sari, she had said something that the daughter-in-law would remember for the rest of her life. The old woman was holding the wedding sari against her chest. Her eyes were dry. She was not crying. She was just holding it the way you hold something you are about to set down for the last time. You do not throw away a garment that kept you warm for 60 years, the old woman said. You fold it. You thank it. You hold it against your heart one last time, and then you let it go. Not because it does not matter, but because you loved it enough to set it down gently. She placed the wedding sari back in the chest. She smoothed the muslin over it. She closed the lid, and she sat on the bed for a while, her hands in her lap, looking at the closed chest, the way you look at a door you have just closed on a room that meant everything to you, not with despair, with the kind of quiet that comes after something has been honored properly. That is upekkha. In Pali, upekkha means equanimity. It is the fourth of the 4 immeasurables in Buddhist teaching, after loving kindness, after compassion, after sympathetic joy, and it is often misunderstood as indifference, as not caring, as being above it all. But upekkha is not coldness. It is the warmth that remains after the storm has passed. It is the steadiness that comes not from refusing to feel, but from having felt everything and still being here. Upekkha is what Diane found at the pool when she stopped comparing and just swam. It is what the old woman found when she folded the sari and set it down. It is the moment when the grief does not disappear, but loosens its grip just enough for you to breathe, just enough for you to see that the body you are in right now, this body, the one lying in this bed tonight, is still yours. Changed, yes. Different, yes. But still yours. Still breathing. Still here. So here is something to carry with you tonight. If you are grieving a body that used to move differently, that used to look differently, that used to feel differently, know this, that grief is not weakness. It is not self-pity. It is not vanity. It is love. You are mourning something you loved. A body that carried you through decades of living. A body that danced and ran and swam and climbed and bent and stretched and held. And mourning something you loved is always worth honoring. Always. You do not need to let go of the grief tonight. You do not need to fix it or resolve it or turn it into a lesson. You just need to know that it is allowed. That the Buddha himself said it is allowed. That soka comes and soka goes, and you are still here, in this bed, in this body, breathing. Let us pause here, take a breath, feel where you are. The pillow under your head, the weight of the blanket, the quiet of the room. You are here, the grief is here, and both of you are allowed to be here. That is enough for now. When you are ready, we will continue together. In the final chapter, we will lie down with the Buddha himself, under 2 sala trees on a moonlit night, and we will hear what he said at the very end. Not about the mind, not about the spirit, about the body. The body that carried him through 80 years of life. The body he finally, gently let go. You are lying down right now. That may seem like an obvious thing to say, but stay with it for a moment. You are lying down. Your body is horizontal. The spine that held you upright all day, that balanced the weight of your head and your shoulders and your arms, and everything you carried, is resting now. It is not working. For the first time since this morning, it is not holding anything up. The bed is holding you. The pillow is holding your head. Gravity, which spent the whole day pulling you down, is now simply keeping you here, close to the earth, and the earth is doing the rest. This is not a small thing. This lying down. Most of us treat it as a transition, the thing we do between the end of the day and the beginning of sleep. We get into bed the way we get into a car, not thinking about the car, thinking about where we are going. We get into bed and we are already reaching for sleep, already hoping for unconsciousness, already wanting the day to be over and the next one to not have started yet. We skip the lying down. We skip the part where the body finally, after 16 or 17 hours of carrying us through the world, sets its burden down. Tonight, let us not skip it. Let us stay here in this lying down for a little while, because lying down is not nothing. In the Buddhist tradition, it is one of the 4 postures: sitting, standing, walking, lying down. The Buddha listed them together, equal in dignity, equal in importance. Lying down is not the lesser posture. It is not what you do when you have failed at sitting. It is its own practice, its own form of awareness, its own way of being fully alive in a body that has done its work for the day. In Pali, there is a word for this kind of settling: paṭisallāna. It is sometimes translated as retreat, or solitude, or seclusion, but those English words carry the wrong weight. They sound like hiding, like running away, like giving up on the world and going somewhere else. But paṭisallāna is not about leaving. It is about returning to yourself, to the body, to the simplest, quietest version of being alive. Not doing, not thinking, not planning. Just being here, in this body, in this bed, in this breath. Paṭisallāna is what the body has been asking for all day. Every ache was a request. Every stiff joint was a petition. Every sigh that came without your permission was the body saying, "Please, can we stop now? Can we lie down? Can we be still?" And now, finally, here you are. The body got what it asked for. The question is whether you will let yourself be here with it, or whether you will spend the next hour thinking about tomorrow. Let us explore a story about this. The last story of the Buddha's life. The Buddha was 80 years old. He had been walking for months, traveling from village to village, across the plains of northern India, teaching as he went. Though his body was failing, his back ached, his digestion had been troubling him for weeks. He ate little, he walked slowly. The monks who traveled with him could see that he was dying, though none of them said it out loud, the way families sometimes do not say it out loud, even when everyone knows. In the weeks before he reached Kusinara, there were signs. He told Ananda that he could, if he wished, extend his life for an aeon, but Ananda, distracted by his own grief, did not ask him to stay. The Buddha ate a meal offered by a blacksmith named Kunda, and afterward he became very ill. He bled. He was in great pain, but he walked on. He walked the way he had always walked, one step at a time, barefoot through the dust, stopping to teach anyone who came to listen. Even dying, the body carried him. Even failing, it did not stop. He reached a small town called Kusinara. It was not a grand place. It was not one of the great cities of India. It was a dusty, unremarkable town with a grove of sala trees on its outskirts. And it was here, among those trees, that the Buddha chose to lie down for the last time. His attendant, Ananda, who had been with him for 25 years, who had brought him water and washed his robes and listened to every teaching and remembered every word, prepared a bed between two sala trees. He folded a robe and placed it on the ground, and the Buddha lay down on his right side, one foot resting on the other, his head supported by his right hand. This is what the texts call the lion's posture, sihasaya, the way a lion lies down in the forest, not crouching, not curling up, but stretched out, fully present, fully aware, resting and awake at the same time. The texts say something remarkable about what happened next. They say that the skin of the Buddha, which had been weathered by 80 years of sun and rain and walking, which had been starved nearly to death during the 6 years in the forest, which bore every mark that a body bears after a long life, became exceedingly clear and radiant, as if the body, knowing it was being laid down for the last time, gave one final gift. One last moment of being fully, completely, beautifully itself. The sala trees bloomed out of season. This detail is in the original text, and whether you take it as literal or as poetry, it means the same thing. The trees responded, the earth responded. Something in the world noticed that this body, this particular body that had walked across India for 45 years and had sat beneath a tree and awakened and had taught kings and farmers and prostitutes and murderers and monks, this body was lying down for the last time. And the world sent flowers. They fell on him softly, white petals, landing on his robe, on his hands, on his face. The air filled with the scent of blossoms that should not have been there in that month. The monks stood around him in silence, and Ananda, standing nearby, began to cry. The Buddha opened his eyes. "Do not grieve, Ananda," he said. "Have I not told you that all things that are born, that come into being, that are formed, they all carry within them the nature of dissolution? How could it be that they should not dissolve? It is not possible." Ananda could not stop crying. He turned away and leaned against the doorpost and wept. The Buddha called him back. He said, "For a long time, Ananda, you have waited on the Tathagata with love and kindness in your acts, with good and constant devotion, without measure or limit. You have earned great merit, Ananda. Keep trying. You too will be free from all these things." Then the Buddha turned to the monks who had gathered around him. Some of them had been with him for decades. Some were young, newly ordained, still learning the chants. They stood in the grove, under the sala trees, with white petals on their robes and tears on their faces. And the Buddha looked at them, all of them, the way a mother looks at her children from the doorway before turning off the light. He spoke his last words. "All compounded things are subject to vanish. Strive with earnestness." And then he closed his eyes. The texts describe what happened next as a series of meditative states, each one deeper than the last, like a diver descending through layers of water, each layer quieter and darker and more still. And at the bottom, at the very bottom, where there was no sound and no light and no movement at all, the Buddha let go of his body, the way you might let go of a rope you have been holding for 80 years. Not because you were forced to, but because your hands were ready. Because the holding was done. Those last two words have been debated for centuries. Strive with earnestness. Some hear them as a command to work harder, to meditate more, to push further. But lying there between the sala trees, with flowers falling on his body and the moonlight coming through the branches, the Buddha was not striving. He was resting. He was lying down. He was letting go. And so perhaps strive with earnestness does not mean what we think it means. Perhaps it means this: be fully here, in whatever you are doing, even if what you are doing is lying down, even if what you are doing is resting, even if what you are doing is breathing in a dark room at the end of a long day. Be earnest about it. Be present for it. Do not check out. Do not run ahead to tomorrow. Do not replay yesterday. Just be here completely with whatever is happening and let it happen. The way the Buddha was fully present for his own bodies last night. The way the sala trees were fully present with their flowers. The way Ananda was fully present with his grief, which the Buddha did not ask him to hide, only not to drown in. Earlier in that same walk toward Kusinara, the Buddha had said something else that is worth hearing tonight. My years are now full ripe. The lifespan left is short. Departing I go hence from you, relying on myself alone. Those words were spoken by a man who had spent 45 years teaching others how to find peace. And at the end he said, I rely on myself alone, not on the teachings, not on the monks, not on the order he had built, on himself, on the body that had carried him, on the awareness that had stayed with him through every step, every meal, every night of sleep. You are not the Buddha, but you are lying down tonight in a body that has carried you through your own long life. And the body is asking the same thing the Buddha's body asked in Kusinara. Let me rest, let me set this down. Let me be done for today. Let us explore one more story about this. Not from 2,000 years ago. From tonight, there is a woman lying in her bed right now. She is 65 years old. Or maybe she is 58. Or maybe she is 72. It does not matter. What matters is that she is here, in this bed, and her body is tired, and she has been carrying things all day. Not heavy things, not anymore. Not the children, they are grown and living in cities she has to fly to see. Not the groceries, someone else does that now. Or she orders them from her phone, which still feels strange after decades of pushing carts through fluorescent aisles. But other things, worry, memory, the quiet weight of being alone in a house that used to be full. The weight of being responsible for everything for so long that she does not know how to set it down even when there is nothing left to carry. The muscles remember the carrying even when the cargo is gone. The shoulders stay tense. The jaw stays clenched. The body holds the shape of the work long after the work is finished. The way a tree holds the shape of the wind even on a still day. Her knees ache. Her lower back has that old familiar stiffness. Her hands are curled slightly, the way they always curl at night, as if they are still holding something they forgot to put down. The shoulder that has been bothering her for 3 years is quiet right now. Not gone, just quiet, the way a dog settles after a long walk. She lies there. She stares at the ceiling. The house is dark. The clock ticks. The refrigerator hums in the kitchen 2 rooms away. The street outside is silent. She can hear her own breathing. She can hear the blood in her ears, a faint rushing, like a river heard from very far away. She has heard that sound every night of her life. But tonight, for some reason, she notices it, and she thinks, that is my heart. That is the sound of my heart moving blood through my body. It has been doing that for 65 years, without being asked, without being thanked. 65 years of beating, of pumping, of keeping her alive through everything. The births and the deaths, and the ordinary Tuesdays, and the terrible Thursdays, and the nights she thought she could not go on, and the mornings she went on anyway. And tonight, instead of thinking about what hurts, instead of making a list of what is wrong, she does something different. She places her hand on her chest. She feels her heart beating, and she speaks to her body, not out loud, just in her mind. Just a quiet conversations between 2 old companions who have been through everything together. Thank you, feet, she says. You walked me through every day of my life. You walked across cold floors in the dark to check on sleeping children. You walked me through airports and supermarkets and hospitals and gardens. You are tired now. You have earned your rest. Thank you, hands. You held everything. You held babies and steering wheels and pens and other hands. You held on when you wanted to let go. You let go when you wanted to hold on. You did both. You did everything. Thank you back. You carried what no one saw, the invisible weight, the things that did not have handles. You bent and straightened and bent again, 1,000 times a day, for decades. You never asked for help. I should have offered it more often. Thank you, heart. You kept beating. Through everything. Through the best morning and the worst night, and every ordinary afternoon in between. You did not stop. Not once. Not ever. The pain does not disappear. The knees still ache. The back is still stiff. The shoulder is still there. Quiet but present. Nothing is fixed. Nothing is healed. But something is different. The body heard her. And she heard the body. And for the first time in a very long time, they are not fighting. They are just lying here together, 2 old friends in a dark room, breathing. That is paṭisallāna. That is the return, not to a place, to a relationship. the oldest relationship you have, the one between you and the body that has never left you. Not for a single second of your entire life. It was there when you were born. It will be there when you die. It has been your only constant companion, more faithful than any friend, more patient than any lover, more forgiving than any parent. It has forgiven you for every time you cursed it, every time you starved it, every time you looked at it in a mirror and said, "You are not enough." It forgave you, and it kept going. It kept beating and breathing and healing and carrying, because that is what bodies do. They forgive. They carry on. They do not hold grudges. They just hold you. So here is what I want to leave you with tonight. You are lying down right now. This is not a small thing. Your body has carried you through another day. It did not ask for your permission. It did not wait for your gratitude. It just carried you, the way it has always carried you. And now it is setting you down, gently, the way a mother sets a sleeping child into a crib. With care, with attention, with the quiet knowledge that the carrying is done for today and the rest can begin. You do not need to carry your body tonight. Let the bed do that. Let the pillow do that. Let the night do that. Let gravity, which has been pulling at you all day, finally be a kindness. Let it hold you close to the earth. Let the earth hold you. You have been held before, and you can be held again. And you are being held right now. Close your eyes if they are not already closed. Feel the weight of your body against the mattress. Notice how the bed does not complain. It does not ask you to be lighter or younger or different. It just holds you, exactly as you are, exactly as much as you weigh. Exactly tonight, your breath is slowing. You do not need to control it. Let it come and go the way the tide comes and goes, in and out, in and out. Each breath a little softer than the one before. Each exhale a little longer. The body knows how to do this. It has been doing it since the very first second of your life. Trust it. It has never forgotten how. The room is quiet. The house is still. The night is here. And you are here. In this body. In this bed. At peace. Not because everything is perfect, but because tonight, you and your body are finally on the same side. You are not fighting anymore. You are just resting. Together, the way two old friends rest after a long, long day. Sleep now, or do not sleep. Either way, you are here. Either way, you are held. Either way, the body that carried you through 60 years of life is still carrying you. Even now, even in the dark, even in the quiet, it has not stopped. It will not stop. Not tonight. The sala trees bloomed out of season for the Buddha. Tonight, nothing is blooming for you. There are no white petals falling on your bed. There is no grove of trees outside your window. There is just the bed, the pillow, the blanket, the dark, and the body that has carried you through everything, lying here beside you, asking for nothing, still breathing, still beating, still yours. That is enough. That has always been enough. Good night. You have done so much. And so has the body you are lying in. Let it rest now. It has earned this. And so, have you? Thank you for spending this time with us tonight, here at Moonlit Dharma. If these words helped you, consider sharing this with someone who might need to hear them. We will be here the next time you need a quiet place to rest. Good night. We have been together for a while now. The night has deepened. The room is darker than it was when we began. And the body you are lying in is a little more settled, a little more still than it was an hour ago. Here at Moonlit Dharma, before we part, let us take a few minutes to look back at where we have been tonight. Not to review, not to study, just to remember, the way you might stand at the doorway of a house you have just walked through, every room, and look back and see the whole of it at once. We began with a seamstress, an old woman in a shop by the sea, whose hands had sewn wedding dresses and school uniforms and funeral suits for 40 years, and whose fingers one evening could no longer thread a needle. She wept. She called her hands useless. And her granddaughter took those hands in her own and said, "These hands are not useless, grandmother. They are finished. There is a difference." We met a young prince named Siddhartha, who stepped outside his palace for the first time and saw an old man walking slowly down a road, and asked his driver, "Will this happen to me?" And the driver said, "Yes, Prince, it will happen to you too." We stood in a bathroom with a woman who wiped the steam from a mirror and saw a stranger looking back. She did not recognize the face. The jaw had softened, the hair had thinned, but then she looked at the eyes, and the eyes had not changed. They were the same eyes that had cried at births and laughed until tea came out of her nose, and watched the sun rise from a hospital window. She put her hand on the glass and said, "I know you." We knelt beside a cracked water jar in a Zen kitchen and learned that the crack was not a flaw. It was how the jar served now. The water that leaked through the crack had been watering a line of moss for 11 years. The moss softened the wall. The wall no longer chipped in winter. Everything in the room had quietly adjusted to the crack, the way everything in your life has quietly adjusted to the aches and changes in your body. We learned from the candle that rūpa, the body's form, does not change despite its purpose, but because of its purpose. The wax changes shape in order to give light. The body changes shape in order to give life. And we learned from a woman who avoided mirrors for 4 years that the eyes never change. They are the same eyes that opened on the first morning of your life and will close on the last night. The face rearranges itself around them, the way a town rearranges itself around a church that has been there since before anyone can remember. But the eyes remain. We sat with Grace, a dancer who had not danced in years, who lay in her bed one night and stopped fighting the pain in her back. She spoke to it. She said, "I know you are there. I hear you." The pain did not go away, but the war ended, and in the silence that followed, she slept. We heard the Buddha teach about 2 arrows. The first arrow is the pain. You cannot avoid it. The second arrow is the suffering you add to the pain. The fear, the anger, the story about decline. That arrow you can put down. Grace put it down, and a woman with fibromyalgia put it down 12 years into her illness. On a night when she was simply too tired to keep fighting, and she said to her body, "What do you need?" And her body softened. Just a fraction, just enough. We followed the Buddha into the forest, where for 6 years he starved and punished his body, believing that freedom lay in the body's destruction. He nearly died, and freedom did not come. It came later, after a young woman named Sujata offered him a bowl of rice milk, and he ate it. He accepted nourishment. He stopped fighting the body. And that was the beginning of everything. We walked the songlines with the Aboriginal elders, who say that the land was sung into existence, one step at a time, and that your body has done something like this. Every step you have ever taken has written something into the world that was not there before. Every wrinkle is a note. Every scar is a verse. Every stiff joint is a chorus, repeated so many times it left a mark. We sat in a garden with Margaret, whose granddaughter asked why she walked so slow. And Margaret said, because these knees have knelt 1,000 times for people I love. We stood on a beach beside an old Polynesian waka, cracked and salt-worn, that the young men wanted to burn, and the old woman refused to let go. This waka carried 40 families across the sea, she said. It does not need to sail again, but it needs to be remembered. We sat in a Zen monastery and heard an old teacher tell his student that the deepest meditation is sometimes lying down, that when the body says rest, listening to that is not laziness, it is the practice itself. And we learned a Pali word, passaddhi. That means the deep settling of body and mind, and that this settling is not the opposite of awakening. It is one of its 7 conditions. We lay on a sofa with Helen, who was 62 and had not rested since her husband died, and who finally, on a Wednesday afternoon, let herself stop. She thought about what she would say to her daughter if her daughter were this tired. "Lie down, sweetheart. Everything else can wait." And she wondered why she had never said the same to herself. She cried. She stared at the ceiling. She heard the refrigerator hum. And something in her body, something that had been clenched for 2 years, softened. We sat in a tent on the frozen Danube with a Roman emperor who could command legions but could not command his own knees to stop aching. And we read what he wrote by lamplight. "Do not despise the body's tiredness. Be well content with it. It is natural." We stood at the edge of a pool with Diane, who could no longer dive, who could no longer lift her arm above her head, who cried at the shallow end and then walked down the steps and swam anyway, slowly, badly, beautifully. "I am not the woman who swam fast," she said. "I am the woman who still swims." We sat in a small room in India and watched an old woman unfold her wedding sari and hold it against her chest. "Krishna says the body is a garment," she said, "but he did not say you cannot fold it with care before you let it go." And we lay down with the Buddha under 2 sala trees in Kusinara and watched the flowers fall on his body out of season, and heard Ananda weep, and heard the Buddha say, "Do not grieve. All compounded things are subject to vanish. Strive with earnestness." And then he closed his eyes and let go of the body that had carried him for 80 years. All of these stories live in the same house, and the house is the one you are lying in right now, your body. Tonight, we heard 3 teachings that are worth carrying with you into sleep. The first was kāyagatāsati, mindfulness immersed in the body, not watching the body from the outside, but sitting inside it, feeling it from within, knowing it the way you know your own kitchen, every drawer, every creak in the floor, every patch of sunlight that comes through the window at a certain hour. The body is not a stranger. It is the most familiar place you have ever lived. The second was Vedana. The raw sensation that arrives before the mind tells a story about it. The ache in the knee is just an ache. The stiffness in the back is just stiffness. It is the mind that adds the second arrow, the fear, the frustration, the story about decline and loss. Tonight, if you can, let the sensation be just sensation. Let the body report what it feels without the mind turning it into a verdict. The third was paṭisallāna, the return, not escape, not retreat, but the quiet act of coming home to yourself, to the body, to the breath, to the place where you have always lived, even when you forgot you were living there. Lying down tonight is not giving up. It is coming home. There is something the Buddha understood that took him 80 years and 6 years in the forest, and a bowl of rice milk, and a lifetime of walking barefoot across India to learn. The body is not the obstacle. The body is not the enemy. The body is not a project that needs finishing, or a problem that needs solving, or a machine that needs repairing. The body is home. It has always been home. And like any home that has been lived in for a long time, it shows the marks. The floors are scuffed. The paint is peeling. The door does not close the way it used to, but every mark tells a story, and every story is yours. So tonight, as the last gift of this evening, let me offer a small blessing. Not a prayer, not a ritual, just a few quiet words spoken to the body that has carried you this far. May the feet that have walked every road of your life find rest tonight. May they remember the grass they ran through as a child, and the floors they crossed in the dark, and the paths they wore between the rooms of every house they ever called home. May they rest. May the hands that have held everything find stillness tonight. May they remember the first hand they ever held, and the last face they ever touched, and every door they opened in between. May they rest on the blanket, or on the chest, or wherever you have placed them. And may they know that their work for today is done. May the back that has carried what no one could see find ease tonight. May the mattress take the weight that the spine has held since morning. May the muscles that have been clenched all day finally soften. May the back that bent and straightened 1,000 times today rest now, horizontal, held by the bed, held by the earth beneath the bed, held by everything that has ever held you. May the heart that has beaten without stopping since the first second of your life continue quietly tonight. Not faster, not slower, just steadily, the way it has always gone, the way it will always go, until the day it decides it has beaten enough. And may you know tonight that every beat was a gift, every single one. May the eyes that have watched everything close now, they have seen enough today. They have seen faces and screens and roads and rooms and the ceiling above this bed. Let them close. Let the dark be kind. Let the dark be soft. Let it be the kind of dark that holds you the way water holds a swimmer. All around, gentle, complete. And may you, the one inside this body, the one who has been listening tonight, the one who has carried worry and memory and love and grief and hope through another day, may you rest now. Not because you have earned it, though you have. Not because you deserve it, though you do. But because the night is here and the body is ready, and there is nothing left to do but let go. You are held. You have always been held. The bed holds you. The night holds you. The breath holds you. And somewhere, in a grove of sala trees that bloomed out of season 2,500 years ago, the Buddha lies on his right side with one foot resting on the other, and a faint smile on a face that carried 80 years of life, and he is at peace, not because he defeated the body, but because he finally, at the very end, let it be what it was, let it rest, let it go. You can do the same. Not the dying, just the resting, just the letting go, just the quiet agreement between you and your body that says, we are done for today. We did enough. We are enough. Sleep now. The body knows how. It has always known how. Trust it one more time. It has never let you down. Good night from all of us here at Moonlit Dharma. If tonight's words brought you some peace, we would love to hear from you in the comments. And if you know someone who is lying awake tonight in a body that aches, someone who might need to hear that they are not broken, just finished with a portion of their work, share this with them. We will be here whenever you need us. The light is always on. Good night, and thank you. Thank you for your body. Thank you for bringing it here. Thank you for letting it rest.